There is a new law being proposed in Canada right now that would make basic ideas from the Bible hate speech. And if you're a Christian, you say these things, you could be prosecuted. Not good. All right, guys, thank you very much. Go ahead, smite that like button and subscribe to this channel if you are new. We're going to talk about this article from the Christian Post. Very interesting today. Canadian bill would remove a religious exemption from hate speech laws. Critics warns Christians say quoting scripture could be criminalized if legislation passes. The article says lawmakers in Canada are considering legislation which, if passed, could criminalize the act of quoting scripture in defense of biblical marriage, sexuality, and other Christian views. The proposed bill C-367, currently under review in the House of Commons, would repeal the religious exemption in Section 319 of the Canadian Criminal Code, which critics could say could open up Christians and other religious groups to hate speech charges over any comments or criticisms of the LGBT movement. Bill C-367 specifically targets paragraph 3, all that gobbledygook, and Criminal Code, which prohibits any conviction on hate speech charges. Now, this is like an amendment, like a thing that gives protection. Prohibits any conviction on hate speech charges if, quote, in good faith the person expresses or attempted to establish by any argument an opinion on a religious subject or an opinion based on a belief in a religious text. So, like if you say, I just don't like this LGBTQ stuff, and you say that because you have a biblical reason for saying that, then you cannot be prosecuted. Now, they're wanting to take that away to where it doesn't matter if you're just some hater saying degenerate stuff on the internet about these people, or if you're a preacher. It's all the same if they pass this. So, not good. If the religious exemption is removed, any religious or faith-based expression that refutes or condemns gender ideology, child sexualization, and other similar topics could potentially be deemed by Canadian courts as hate speech and lead to criminal persecution for Christians and other religious groups. Introduced by Bloc, I can't just say these French words, has only initial reading in the House of Commons and it's unclear whether or if the legislation will advance, while Blanchette and other lawmakers say Bill C-367 comes in response to recent anti-Semitic demonstrations in Canada, including one which Muslim activists called for God to exterminate the Zionist aggressors. Some organizations like the Canadian Pro-Life Group warned the legislation could lead to more criminal persecutions against Christians. So apparently there's Muslims there that are saying terrible things about Israel, and they're trying to remove this religious exemption to prosecute these people. Now, do you see how this gets real dicey real quick? This is why we need religious liberty, folks. This is a dangerous precedent to set. And oh boy, wow! In February, David Cook, CLC's campaign manager, wrote, quote, "No longer will we be allowed to share God's design for human sexuality and marriage in public. No longer will we be able to speak out in the name of God against drag shows for kids and all that type of stuff. All that could be misconstrued as hate speech." Yikes. And so even our pro-life message could be spun as hate speech against women. Oh, wow. You see how there's a lot here? Now, one thing, okay, hate speech is, to me, quite a silly thing because, I mean, if you say something that's just so strong, I don't know, I mean, unless you're like threatening somebody, I don't know how it should be legally a crime unless it's libelous and it causes monetary harm or it's a threat. Then you should be able to say a lot of stuff in society, of course, with certain exemptions. But the problem that I have with hate speech is that it's just too broad. It's too broad a concept. I mean, you speak against obesity. Like, if you eat 40 pounds of Twinkies a day, you're gonna get diabetes. Well, that's hate speech. You're hating on my body positivity. You lowered my self-esteem. How dare you say I went into a depression, couldn't go to work because you told me I couldn't eat 40 pounds of Twinkies in a day. Oh, what am I doing? You caused me harm. That's hate speech. Throw this person in jail. Well, you don't want to live in that society. I mean, that's Planet of the Apes communism, man. That's insanity. You don't want to do that. So where do we draw the line on this stuff? I mean, if a guy stands outside an abortion clinic and holds up a sign saying, this is murder, is that hate speech? Or, I mean, well, personally, I think it's just a statement of fact. But it seems like, just from where the article is worded, that when these Muslim groups talk about exterminating people, that's a legitimate threat. Like, you are threatening somebody. That should be some sort of, there should be some sort of legal recourse for that. You can't just get up and say, I'm going to do something terrible to somebody. You can't do that. But at the same time, this hate speech stuff goes way too broad. I'm worried about that. The same method that overseas dictators and despots used to silence and strangle Christianity are now being used by political enemies in the West, with this current bill being only the latest example. And I agree with that. Canada, it all starts with small things like hate speech, and then after a while, you can't even have a gun anymore. And next thing you know, you're North Korea. That's where it seems to all go. Matter of fact, if you look at communist China, we did a documentary called God's Millstone on this channel. Very interesting stuff there. If you go take the time to watch that, I think that'll be a great help to you. But God's Millstone, we talked about this kind of stuff and how they just take a bit here and a bit there, and next thing you know, like there's a segment in God's Millstone where Chinese people of the church there in that whatever city it was, they just went into a public square just to stand there so they could protest the fact that we don't want the Chinese government writing our pastor's sermons, and we don't want the government of China approving what Bible version we can use. That's what they put them in a re-education camp because they did that. Now, is that the communist hellscape that you want to live in? Certainly, I don't want to live in that. Give me liberty, buddy. Let me do what I want. And you people that are voting, and by the way, this is what you get when you get free health care. This is the road that goes down. A government that's so big it can take care of all that for you can certainly strip you of your liberties as well. He called on Christians and Canadian citizens and faiths of all stripes to make their voices heard by Canadian government officials. There's your ecumenicism right there. Canadians that enjoy the fruits of democracy need to wake up. Any politician in the West who pushes for this kind of legislation and is selling protection and unity by advancing hate speech laws is an enemy of freedom and democracy, and willing to undermine the religious and speech laws that protect all citizens to advance their special interest or to inflict damage on their political enemies. Yikes. It says right here, in 2017, Canada's Senate passed a law against the correct use of gender pronouns by adding protection for gender identity and expression to Canadian Human Rights Code. Last September, lawmakers in Ontario, Canada approved a ban on any form of communication that might potentially cause an LGBT person to feel harassed or offended following a massive parental rights rally. But the bylaw approved by city councilors in Waterloo, located about 45 miles southwest of Toronto, came in response to a new policy enacted by several local school boards. The policy states that parents will not be told if their child decides to change their pronouns or identifies the opposite sex, non-binary, or gender fluid. Wow, there's a lot going on in Canada. You guys need some prayer, I reckon. But this is the problem. This is when these people can't clearly define what this means. It's like dominoes, man. It gets bigger and bigger and more troublesome and more infiltrating into your life and your day-to-day. Next thing you know, you can't even say anything about anything anymore because you might offend somebody. And even like it says right here, we don't want the LGBT people to feel harassed or offended. Well, if you can't, and I'm not for harassing people, but when you start saying terms like feel harassed, that's subjective. And that's where all these woke people get into these microaggressions and, like a white dude driving a truck up on a college campus with loud mufflers going, whoa, whoa, and he parks his Ford truck and playing country music, gets out of his truck, walks into class. That is a microaggression. Oh, I feel threatened by you being here. Well, the dude just go into class. You're getting an engineering degree. Why you got to feel offended by that? Why do you feel harassed by that? Now, of course, I'm not for just intentionally offending people. That's not very nice. And I try to live like a Christian and try to not be unkind or especially harsh with people. But some of this stuff is just so draconian and so broad and so subjective. I mean, I can just stand there and just be having a bad day with a look on my face and just look at somebody, and they'll all of a sudden I'm going to jail because they felt harassed by that. The political left goes too far. And I think it's time that Canadian Christians need to realize that you're in a weird spot right now, guys. You guys are in a weird spot because this is potentially dangerous for you. And I'm not advocating for harassing people or being intentionally harsh or unkind or cruel to people. I mean, a lot of that stuff I don't engage in all that. But when we get to this level, there's a danger here where good people could be harmed by a bad law. And that's not what anybody wants. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, guys. Go watch Third Adam as well. Third Adam will change your life, buddy. It's available on our YouTube channel. We know that it'll be a blessing to you. Go check that out and like this video if it helped you. God bless you.